my number one is a film that has been covered on a movie series, but not one that I was on. And that's actually true of one other movie that I have here. I wasn't on the Black Hat episode, but I just didn't want to include it. I don't know. Whatever.
Fair.
But this movie has been covered by yourself and JD. And if you'll recall recently when we did our greatest films of all time, top 10,
yep,
I decided that Terrence Malick is my favorite filmmaker ever. It just came to me in a moment. It was like a lightning bolt that struck me, and I was like, oh, I think 2 of the 10 greatest movies of all time are from Terrence Malick. That probably means he's my favorite director.
JD's response during that podcast as we were recording he looked like the proudest dad I think I've ever seen. I mean, you had just become a dad yourself, so it was like rubbing off on him there.
And maybe that was part of the revelation was, wow, these movies mean something different to me now than they did 4 months ago or whenever we recorded that podcast. But
yeah,
it is he's turned out to be one of my favorite filmmakers. I actually didn't watch his later movies until a year ago or so. Because I just heard everybody was like, oh, well, he's, he got kind of washed. I had watched A Hidden Life and everybody said, oh, it's a return to form. He's back.
Yeah.
And so I had always kind of avoided his trifecta of To the Wonder, Knight of Cups, and Song to Song. Turns out I like all of those movies a lot and really love 2 of them. Yeah. And one of those that I love is Song to Song, but the one that I really, really love is Knight of Cups.
Yeah.
I think that movie is very, very special, and I think it kind of portrays the numbness of depression, which I think in the film is defined by its sound design and the blurring of the line between dreams and reality in that film. I think it depicts that so beautifully and with such a sense of compassion, while still having those Malickian signatures of kind of this timeless spirituality, but it's set. The thing that I think shocked so many people as his career went on and post Tree of Life. My whole theory with him with Tree of Life and his movies that came after that was, okay, I said everything that I really need to say with Tree of Life.
Yeah.
I am now going to try something new and to a certain extent just mess around with the form.
And it's kind of an unofficial trilogy of his, right? It's like this post-Tree of Life trilogy of messing with form, like you say. There are 3 films that more or less do that exact same thing.
With contemporary backdrops, which as you go back and watch Malick's films, you kind of feel like, okay, his movies really make sense when they're set in the 40s and 50s. And however, I think it completely recontextualizes his ideas when you set them in the modern world. It to me, this one more than any of the other films feels like a contemporary extension of the Tree of Life. I mean, there's repeated imagery at times, and there's a coldness and a distance to this movie that his other films don't really have. That I think really contributes to the sense of despair. And there is a lot of meta elements of this film as well, because you have this actor played by Christian Bale who is trying to kind of find some modicum of happiness in this situation that he finds himself stuck in, despite in his mind, he has achieved everything that he at one time thought he wanted. It's about this idea of finding satisfaction once again, whether that is through his art or whether that is through maybe even abandoning this life that he has now found himself in. And I just think it has such an intense emotional core to it in the way that every Malick film does. Yeah. And his ability to manipulate the form and forward the form, bring it to places that you've never really seen before, I think is no more clear than it is in Knight of Cups. It's to me as experimental as Tree of Life. I really think it is on par as far as stylistic experimentation. I don't think it is as successful as that film because it is my favorite film of all time.
Yeah, so that's a hard bar to live up to.
Yes. That's why it is my second favorite film of all time. No.
No. It's not even your second favorite Malick film, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's not even
It's
like
not even
my
like it was
fifth
like number
favorite Malick.
6 or something like that.
Yeah, it's something. My one, I posted my Malick rankings on Twitter, and the one of the responses I got was, "Oh, how on earth do you have this ahead of Badlands?" Which I know is a very hot take. Badlands is one of the greatest directorial debuts of all time.
Yeah.
I find this movie even more compelling than one of the greatest directorial debuts of all time.
You know,
It is, to me,
I
that
don't
special,
disagree.
that influential.
I don't know if I disagree with that. I certainly like Badlands as a film more than Night of Cups, but when JD and I did our Terrence Malick movie series on the main show some time ago, I really began to appreciate that post Tree of Life trilogy where he was
Yeah.
messing with form even more. Admittedly, I'm still not quite sold on movies like To the Wonder or Song to Song. I'm not quite there yet, even though I admittedly like them more on those rewatches. But Night of Cups more or less worked for me on that rewatch. And I think a lot of it is due to Christian Bale sort of being this like center, this cipher for everything that the film seems to be implying. And I think that kind of helps rein in some of those experimental tendencies that Malick is messing with here. Having that cipher, I think, really helps that film quite a bit. And I think Christian Bale is kind of provocative in the movie. He's
Oh yeah.
weirdly interesting to watch, despite not giving much of a performance. It's a weird thing to say, but I'm more or less with you on at least appreciating and liking the film more than I don't. It's definitely not upper tier Malick for me, but there is something very provocative and very biblical about it that I really appreciate it on a rewatch.
Yeah, it's so disorienting in the way it kind of puts you in this space that isn't reality, isn't dream, isn't madness. It's just this void, really, of existence where you can't really discern exactly what is around you because you're in this mental space that doesn't allow you to really comprehend your world in the same way that you are accustomed to, or we, the viewer, are accustomed to. It puts you in this mind space that is so effectively realized. It's just Malicky. It's Malicky. Find it in the edit.
It's Malicky,
just record a bunch of crazy stuff and give you this
and
very
annoy most of your stars
expressionistic-
at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Although, I guess it's so interesting. Not many people have worked with him multiple times. Bale has.
Yeah. Who else has?
Christopher Plummer didn't.
No, he famously didn't.
It's fascinating, his career. It's really
it really
wild.
is. Yeah, I still think my favorite of his is the Thin Red Line. That's up there for me. But I mean, it's between that and the Tree of Life. Those are my top two for sure.
That is my second favorite Malick, and also my 9th favorite film of all time, according to our top 10 list. So
yeah, it's funny. We posted that episode.
Praise.
We posted that episode, I don't know how long ago, and I've already made changes to that. I don't know if you have. I mean, it's just,
I mean, I don't know. I haven't really gone through it since then. I am kind of sticking to it, at least in the intermediate term, because it took it was a
it took so long to put together. You kind of
exercise exactly.
Yeah. You kind of want to hold that credibility close to the chest for a little while, and I'm kind of the same way. But admittedly, I'm thinking I could probably make some shifts here every now and then.
Well, you saw Shazam 2, of course, has made your list.
I mean, that's the greatest movie ever made, right? I mean, Shazam 2. Yeah, that's why it's called that. Fury of the Gods. Made me furious indeed. All right, let's get to my number one that I have listed here for my favorite, or maybe not favorite, but my number one divisive movie. I'm sort of second guessing myself on this one now. I guess this comes down to what we consider a divisive movie nowadays, because the movie I originally had at my number one, Jay, it's not a divisive movie anymore, but it was when it first came out. And I guess that raises the question, should it still qualify for this list? It's interesting. We're recording this now, and in the moment, I'm starting to rethink my number one film. I might change it up. Okay, so I'll just let you know off the bat. The film I originally had at number one was Vertigo, Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo.
Of course. Bad reviews at first, then all of a sudden considered the greatest film of all time for a while.
So, that's the thing. It's like because nowadays, especially those who are coming into this fresh, who might not know that history, might be thinking, why are you picking one of the greatest movies ever made as a
Yeah.
divisive movie?
I looked at it through a more modern
And
lens.
I'm kind of thinking I should do that. I mean, it makes sense for a movie like Vertigo to at least be talked about in this capacity because it wasn't a huge box office hit. Critics didn't really like it at the time. I know outlets like Variety and Time Magazine called it too slow and too long, I think. So it's changed, though. So you know what? I'm going to spontaneously change my tune and change my number one. I'm going to do what you're doing and look at it through a more modern lens and pick a movie that I know still to this day is divisive in some way and I would not recommend to everybody. I'm going to go with Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin for my number
Right.
one. So we'll stick with this. One of the most visually provocative and frightening movies I think I've ever seen, and yet I have no idea what the film's still about. I don't really know what Glazer's really trying to say about the perception of how we carry ourselves physically, especially from an otherworldly presence, and how they misconstrue that. There's a weird sense of prejudice about beauty, I think, that's being portrayed here in its own way, in a very disgusting way. I'll never forget the image of what do you want to call that? The skin deterioration scene, I think, is all we'll label it as.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know how to describe it. It is one of the most frightening things I've ever seen. If I just want to annoy my worst enemy, I'll just send him a YouTube clip of that scene and say, here you go. Just watch this. Is this a movie that you're a fan of? I don't even know what you think about this one.
You know, it's not one that I would put up there with my favorites. It's actually not even one that I thought of when I was putting this list together, but it's a great pick. This is one of those that I'm actually kind of divided on, and I honestly owe a rewatch because I did find it to be so different than what I thought it was going to be when I watched it, that now, kind of knowing what I'm getting into, I think I would appreciate it more if I watched it again.
It really has no narrative backbone whatsoever, and really the only portion of the film that has any real direct narrative or any direct drama of sorts is when she meets the man with the trying to say this as delicately as possible, but the man with the deformed face. And there is a level of empathy being portrayed in that scene. It almost feels like this strange short film being interjected into this very evocative kind of movie. But when you have that sandwiched in the middle of this experimental odyssey, it just makes for such a jarring experience. And I feel like it's appropriate to at least acknowledge on this list because it's one of those movies that myself and JD, especially JD, we talked about this way back in the early days of InSession Film, and it's one that I recall JD not even being that high on when he first saw it. Also, really annoying his now wife when he took her to see it with him, and has since considered it one of the best films of the year 2014. And I'm with him on that. It's at least in my top 20. So it's interesting the journey that it's gone on with not just critics, but us here at InSession Film, myself and JD specifically. So it felt almost nostalgic to include it on this list. So I'll go with Under the Skin as my actual number one here. I love Vertigo. I think it kind of qualifies, but I think it more so qualifies at a certain point in history than it does now.
Right.
So I'm going to make that switch now.
We're getting a new Glazer this year, aren't we? Like a Nazi?
We are. Yeah. I remember JD talking about it as one of his most anticipated of the year. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Light viewing. Just
viewing.
A breezy watch.
Have you ever seen his movie Birth with Nicole Kidman?
No, I haven't.
That is a wild movie.
Watch it. I'll probably do a full Glazer watch before the Nazi movie comes out, which I can't remember what it's called, but
I forget the name of it as well. But yeah, he's only got 3 films, so it's not to say that it's an easy filmography to get through because of how his films ultimately feel. But at the same time, it's only 3 movies, so it's less homework to do at least.
Yep, it almost feels like him making a Nazi movie is unfair. How much of a downer it's going to be. It's like a cheat code.
And yeah, I'm weirdly still so excited to see that.
I'm stoked.
Yeah.